Tonight on Greater Boston, former U.S. Attorney Michael Sullivan and Western New England University law professor Jennifer Taub joined me to wade through today's January 6th Select Committee evidence. And on day 4 of the hearings, the focus was on how Donald Trump pressured Georgia and Arizona officials to illegally overturn their election results because of unproven fraud in the states, fraud that we once again heard from multiple witnesses did not actually exist, as he was told repeatedly.
I said something to the effect of, sir, we've done dozens of investigations, hundreds of interviews. The major allegations are not supported by the evidence developed.
Find those votes. They should absolutely find that. Just over 11,000 votes, that's all we need. They defrauded us out of a win in Georgia, and we're not going to forget it.
The Fulton County allegations had no merit. There was no evidence of a subterfuge.
This election has to be turned around because we won Pennsylvania by a lot, and we won all of these swing states by a lot.
I just remember I either replied or called somebody saying, unless we have litigation pending that's like in these states, like I don't think this is appropriate, or this isn't the right thing to do.
Perhaps a bit of an understatement. Once again, we heard that the driving forces behind this, alongside Trump, were his favorite lawyers, Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman, both of whom displayed impeccable legal reasoning throughout. Here's a bit of what we heard today about Giuliani's.
He said, we've got lots of theories, we just don't have the evidence.
And here's some of Eastman's as he pushed Arizona's House Speaker to illegally decertify his state's election results.
And he said, just do it and let the court sort it out.
Wonder what they charge for that kind of advice. And so the pressure campaign went on, aimed at multiple election officials, spearheaded by the then president himself, who made call after call to Georgia election officials, as we heard yet again today.
Hopefully, I will, when the right answer comes out, you'll be praised. I mean, I don't know why, they've made it so hard. They will be praised. People will say, great, because that's what it's about, that ability to check and to make it right. Because everyone knows it's wrong. There's just no way. Anyway, but whatever you can do, Francis, it would be, it's a great thing. It's an important thing for the country. So important. You have no idea it's so important. Well, and I very much appreciate it.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. Why wouldn't you want to find the right answer, Brad, instead of keep saying that the numbers are right? So look, can you get together tomorrow? And Brad, we just want the truth. It's simple. And everyone's going to look very good if the truth comes out. It's okay. It takes a little while, but let the truth come out. And the real truth is I won by 400,000 votes, at least. So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
He only needed 11,000 votes, but the officials under pressure were meticulous, refuting Team Trump's claims point by point.
The numbers are the numbers. The numbers don't lie. We had many allegations, and we investigated every single one of them. In fact, I challenged my team, did we miss anything? They said that there was over 66,000 underage voters. We found that there's actually zero. You can register to vote in Georgia. When you're 17 and a half, you have to be 18 by election day. We checked that out, every single voter. They said that there was 2,423 non-registered voters. There was zero. They said that there was 2,056 felons. We identified less than 74 or less that were actually still in felony sentence. Every single allegation we checked. We ran down the rabbit trail to make sure that our numbers were accurate.
And Trump's response to the Secretary of State's litany of facts?
I watched you this morning, and you said, well, there was no criminality, but I mean, all of this stuff is very dangerous stuff. When you talk about no criminality, I think it's very dangerous for you to say that.
And indeed it was, as far too many people found out, including top election officials and their families.
My cell phone was doxxed, and so I was getting texts all over the country, and then eventually my wife started getting the text, and hers typically came in as sexualized texts, which were disgusting. And then some people broke into my daughter-in-law's home.
We started to hear the noises outside my home, and my stomach sunk, and I thought, it's me. And then it's just, we don't know what's the uncertainty of that was the fear. Like, are they coming with guns? Are they gonna attack my house? I'm in here with my kid, I'm trying to put him to bed.
And then there were the election workers, ordinary people just trying to play a role in the democratic process, but whose lives were ultimately upended. People like Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, who we heard from today, detailing what happened after Trump and friends released a surveillance video that the campaign falsely claimed showed the pair bringing suitcases full of fraudulent ballots to the vote in Fulton County, Georgia.
I received a call from my grandmother, screaming at the top of her lungs, like, Shay, oh my God, Shay, just freaking me out, saying that there were people at her home, and they knocked on the door, and of course she opened it and seeing who was there, who it was, and they just started pushing their way through, claiming that they were coming in to make a citizen's arrest. They needed to find me and my mom. I haven't been anywhere at all. I've gained about 60 pounds. I just don't do nothing anymore. I don't want to go anywhere. I second guess everything that I do. It's affecting my life in a major way, in every way. All because of lies. For me doing my job, same thing I've been doing forever.
I've lost my name, and I've lost my reputation. I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people, starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me and my daughter, Shay, to push their own lies about how the presidential election was stolen.
There's simply no words. Joined now by former U.S. Attorney Michael Sullivan. He was appointed by George W. Bush, successfully prosecuted the shoe bomber, worked with former special counsel Robert Mueller at the Department of Justice, and is now a partner with the Ashcroft Group. We're also joined by Jennifer Taub. She's a Western New England University law professor and author of Big Dirty Money, The Shocking Injustice and Unseen Cost of White-Collar Crime. Jennifer and Michael, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Can we try to divide this? Let's put aside for a moment Ms. Shay, Ms. Moss, and Ms. Freeman. We'll get to the election workers later. Michael, starting with you, what was your takeaway focusing on the testimony of the election officials from Georgia and the Speaker of the House in Arizona?
Well, in terms of the elected official in Georgia, it was apparent to me listening to his testimony, particularly the clips that you played is the lead in here, that he thoroughly investigated the allegations concerning fraud that were being presented to him, by those associated with the Trump campaign. Mm-hmm. So I give him credit, for running those allegations of fraud down. That's what an election official should be doing, is to ensure the integrity of the election process.
And how about the Arizona Speaker? I have to say, I'm not the lawyer that either of you are, but if I ever saw a perfect witness in a public hearing, he was right up there. What'd you make of that testimony, Michael?
I thought his testimony appeared to be sincere. In the testimony that I heard, both the clip that you played and a little bit earlier today as I watched some of the January 6th committee testimony, he never once indicated that President Trump asked him to do anything improper or illegal. President Trump indicated that attorneys working on the campaign behalf, on President Trump's behalf, particularly Rudy Giuliani, represented that they had over 200,000 people that Rudy Giuliani, I think, described, or at least the Speaker of the House described, as illegal aliens that voted, and somewhere around 5,000 people that were deceased that voted. Mm-hmm. Again, it wasn't President Trump that was making those representations, it was Rudy Giuliani. And what I heard from the Speaker of the House is President Trump clearly indicated and instructed Rudy Giuliani to turn that evidence over to the Speaker because he had asked specifically for the evidence.
Which he never did, by the way, which the Speaker said he never got any of it despite repeated requests. Jennifer, I want your overall reaction, but I'd also like to hear what your response is to what Mike Sullivan said about Trump and the Speaker in Arizona.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I had the opportunity to watch all of the testimony other than maybe a 2-minute break toward the end. And I think there was closer links drawn between, for the first time, direct links drawn between Donald Trump and the conspiracy. In particular, it was testimony that was on tape that you may have noticed, Jim, with Ronna Romney McDaniels, who was asked on the telephone by Donald Trump, introduced to Eastman, and asked to have the RNC work to help find these alternative electors. So this was the first time that we saw that he was definitely involved with Eastman on this, that it wasn't just Eastman's idea. That's important because, as you know, we have the judge who has said that this was a conspiracy in violation of, at least from a more likely than not standard, that the Eastman and Trump engaged in a conspiracy to defraud the U.S. under 371 and obstruction of congressional proceeding under 1512.
That's
but
Judge
overall,
Carter in California.
Judge
for those.
Carter.
Yeah.
But really quickly, I mean, I think this hearing spoke on a legal and factual level. And I do think all of the witnesses that you mentioned were credible, were honorable. And I especially liked what we were just talking about, Rusty Bowers from Arizona saying, you know, show me the evidence. And ultimately, what Mike not have maybe didn't see is it turns out Rudy said we don't have evidence, we have a theory. You know, and given that Donald Trump himself will constantly kind of change the numbers around and so on, I don't think he cared about the evidence. We saw him rejecting the evidence about, in fact, even when he was told about evidence, for example, in Georgia, that they were not, you know, bringing in votes or whatever, he refused to look at the links.
Well, there's no, just on that note, for people who missed the hearing, despite the fact that there was extensive response from the 2 Georgia election officials saying that those so-called suitcases full of votes, all of which were Biden, it was totally refuted. And despite that fact, on subsequent dates, again and again, the president repeated the same suitcase theory, which is one of the things that got Ms. Moss and Freeman in trouble. But I want to stay on the criminality issue today, if I may, and follow up on what Jennifer said there, Mike Sullivan. How about this fake elector thing? First of all, let me just play a little bit of sound. This is the head of the GOP in Michigan, Laura Cox, on a conversation she had with a Michigan alternative elector, some call them fake electors, working with the Trump campaign. Here's what she had to say.
He told me that the Michigan Republican electors were planning to meet in the Capitol and hide overnight so that they could fulfill the role of casting their vote in per law in the Michigan chambers. And I told him in no uncertain terms that that was insane and inappropriate.
You know, Michael, I assume we'd agree there was no basis for these alternative electors. And as Jennifer said a minute ago, on that phone call to the head of the RNC saying, help us with these fake elector or alternative elector slates, Donald Trump initiated the call and then turned it over to his lawyer. Is that not a problem in your estimation, potentially criminally, for the former president?
I think it's going to take far more than that to charge and to successfully prove some type of crime. That he, as I understood it in that tape you just played, that he was not Donald Trump. That he was somebody else.
Yes, it was a different
No,
tape.
and that, excuse me, that tape it was. But Trump initiated the call. This is not disputed. To the head of the Republican National Committee asking to help.
It was Ronna Romney McDaniel, head of the.
Correct, totally different thing.
Totally different.
Michigan was just one example. There's no question Trump initiated that call.
Well, and the fact that Trump initiated a call is not evidence of a crime. I think what you heard in terms of the recorded conversation that President Trump had with the elected official in Georgia was about the truth. The president was looking for the truth for a number of different reasons.
Michael, find me 11,780 votes, which just happened to be one more vote than he needed to flip it. That's not a legal problem for the former president?
I don't think so. If you start from a premise that you believe that over 400,000 votes either were improper or not properly counted for you, and you do the math and you say, listen, all I need is 11,000. There was a difference of around 11,700 votes. And if you're just switching votes, then you need half of that.
But Michael, doesn't the premise, Michael, if I may, Jennifer, one second. Michael, doesn't the premise, to use your word, need some factual basis rather than just manufacturing numbers that your own people, except for Giuliani and Eastman, say are total BS?
Well, at some point in time, maybe most other people, except Rudy Giuliani and Eastman, question whether or not any of those numbers that had been previously provided to the president could be supported. But candidates seek recounts in a number of different instances when they believe that there were votes that weren't counted for themselves.
Got it.
Nobody has ever suggested a request for a recount or to investigate voter fraud or to challenge an election result is a crime. Other candidates have done it, including Hillary Clinton. You know, she described President Trump.
Okay, let's have Jennifer's responses. Go ahead, Jennifer. Michael, let Jennifer
I'm
go
not getting equal time here.
Go ahead.
I mean, I just want to be clear.
Yeah, I just said Jennifer. That's why I said your name.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So my mother is a Republican politician. She's run for office many times. In recounts, you do not make up that number of votes in a recount, first of all. Second of all, it's even if you believed that you had won, which I don't, even if that was factual, to tell somebody in Georgia, if a Georgia politician, Ravensburger, just picked the number out of a hat and came up with those exact votes, that would be a crime under Georgia law. And this is what the Fulton County DA is investigating. Also, I don't think it's credible for you to say that Donald Trump, that at that point in time, when he was told about the audits, when he was told all of the details of what went on, and he continued to repeat the stuff he was told was incorrect, I think that goes to his corrupt intent. And it does, I think, support exactly what Judge Carter said, which is, I believe more likely than not, it was a conspiracy to defraud the United States. And the only question, which I think you're absolutely right about, is whether a jury would believe it. I don't think they have enough evidence right now to get to beyond a reasonable doubt in front of a jury. And I think we just have to see what further evidence they can come up with. But I think it's enough to charge.
Michael Sullivan, how about the point that Jennifer just made about the president's repeated assertions about fraud and illegality, despite the fact that, again, everybody around him, at least as far as we know, with the exception of Giuliani and Eastman, were telling him there was no basis for any of that, but none of it stopped him from repeating the same issue. Doesn't that destroy his credibility in a case?
Well, credibility is, the lack of credibility is not evidence of a crime. Hillary Clinton declared President Trump as an illegitimate president. She said that Putin rigged the election.
What did she do? What did she do in furtherance of that might arguably be a crime, other than say it?
She essentially demanded a recount, or had her people demand a recount when the election results weren't nearly as close as they were in the 3 states in particular that President Trump asked for election officials to take a closer look at the results.
But Michael, if I may, I don't know, Trump's most fierce critic has never suggested, at least as far as I know, that demanding a recount is inappropriate. Demanding a recount is perfectly fine. Advancing claims of fraud and continuing to state Well, let's go to Jennifer. Go ahead.
It's also after timing does matter. In other words, December 14th, when the states certified their electors, is a very different thing than a few days after an election, people asking for a recount of votes. I mean, what Trump was asking to be done was for, in addition to this, as we know, for Mike Pence to actually, open the votes and throw out the electors that had been certified by the states. So this was part of a larger conspiracy. There are all these different pieces. And there's no question in my mind that it's more likely than not this happened. I think from a prosecution perspective, I think we have to, I don't know what Merrick Garland may have uncovered, but to suggest that everything that Donald Trump did was legitimate, I think is putting blinders on.
If we can switch gears, because I don't want to run out of time, because I thought it was some of the most moving testimony I ever had. Here's a little bit more from Georgia election worker Shay Moss describing the nature of some of the threats, at least, that she received.
A lot of threats, wishing death upon me, telling me that I'll be in jail with my mother, and saying things like, be glad it's 2020 and not 1920.
Were a lot of these threats and vile comments racist in nature?
A lot of them were racist. A lot of them were just hateful.
And Michael, this is a product, I think there's no dispute here, of the president continuing to suggest that those suitcases were stuffed with Biden ballots, which weren't suitcases. And I believe the count was 18 times in that perfect 67-minute call with Secretary of State Raffensperger, in which he mentioned Ms. Moss. It almost, to me, and I'm not talking about criminality here, I'm talking about humanity, it's almost like a terror campaign directed against these two women that frankly succeeded.
I think it's horrible what Ms. Moss and her mother have had to endure. And your heart breaks for them. And I'm not going to defend anybody that essentially put them in that type of position. It's sad. I hope they're able to reclaim their lives.
The primary person that put them in that position was Donald Trump. Should he be held accountable for that?
Well, again, I held accountable in what way? From in the form of public opinion? Certainly, he should be held accountable in the form of public opinion. I don't think Donald Trump, I've not had one conversation with Donald Trump about any of this. I don't think Donald Trump pulled all these things out of the air. I think people close to him suggested to him that there was wide-scale fraud and he had won the election in a number of states.
But Raffensperger and Sterling made clear that his repeated assertions about the so-called suitcases were completely factually wrong. Yet he continued to advance them to the detriment of these two women.
And again, Jim, I'm not going to defend in terms of the harm that's been caused to them.
Jennifer, can I ask you a return for a second to the legal issue? Jack Goldsmith, who's the head of Office of Legal Counsel years ago and is a professor at Harvard Law School, and he's not the only one, it raises an issue, and he also raised it in a book he wrote with Jack Bauer. We're going to replay that interview Thursday night about how to reform the presidency to create some institutional safeguards. Can you imagine a situation, Jennifer, where a prosecutor was convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump had committed crimes, but decided because of the national interest not to prosecute? Is that, in your estimation, an appropriate judgment to be made by a federal prosecutor, whether it's Merrick Garland or anybody else?
Well, I mean, it's within their remit
of course
to make their choices, right? So that's not the choice that I would make in that role. But, when you choose their limited resources, you have to choose how you're going to direct them. And if a prosecutor believes that they can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, then unless there's some major collateral consequence that I don't know about, I think they should bring the case. I mean, so, this comes up a lot in the case of corporate criminal prosecution, right? The collateral consequences doctrine and so on. And I can imagine there being fear about bringing this kind of case. But if there's enough evidence to, I think, get a conviction that they think they can, even if they don't know if they could sustain an appeal, but if they're convinced that they have the evidence and they could convince a jury, I think they should bring the case.
Let me ask Mike Sullivan that. Mike Sullivan, let's assume Merrick Garland disagrees with you and concludes that there is evidence that Donald Trump has committed crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. How should he weigh the question of what the national interest is in a criminal prosecution against former president, which obviously has never been done in this country?
Yeah, and I think in most instances, prosecutors, whether at the federal level or state level, don't essentially make that type of judgment in most of the matters that you undertake. But there are limited circumstances in which the national, international interest might mitigate against, pursuing criminal charges. I know in certain circumstances we had a matter that had international potential implications, and the department declined to authorize us to move forward in the case. So it does happen, Jim. And again, we don't know what Merrick Garland has, or all we know,
of course we don't,
is what's been testified in front of the January 6th committee. And I think we all have to agree that it's clearly one-sided.
Of course it is.
It's not typically what you would see in a prosecution or even in a grand jury investigation.
No, that's understood. That is understood. Mike Sullivan, Jennifer Taub, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Hope to see you again.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. The next hearing starts on Thursday at 3 p.m. We'll bring you the big moments here at 7 once again. And as always, you can listen to the full hearings live on GBH Radio 89.7, stream them at gbhnews.org, or catch them live on the GBH World Channel, which is offering a full re-airing at 3 a.m. the morning after each hearing as well. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. The New York Times best-selling author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi, joins me on his new book, How to Raise an Anti-Racist. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget Ukraine.